From the National Weather Service in Raleigh, it's Nick Petro with your routine Monday morning weekly briefing for Central North Carolina. This briefing covers the period this week through the 19th of June. Routine briefing, perhaps, but the weather is a little bit more than routine. We've got quite a pattern and quite a few weather players here that that will affect our weather. So there's two hazards I want to specifically right off the bat mention, and number one is going to be heat. We've got a lot of heat for this week, and I think that's probably going to be the primary hazard this week. The secondary hazard will be risk for severe thunderstorms tomorrow. So let me go ahead and put some things on this map here to kind of convey what's going on. And right now I've got radar, and that's the only thing you're seeing right here. Obviously nothing over us. I'm watching this big thunderstorm complex here over the Midwest, and as I put satellite imagery on there, look at the cloud, how expansive that is. We're mainly clear here across the Carolinas. There is an area of cloudiness there across the southwest Virginia. And I thought I would try to loop this, but sometimes this loop takes a little while to load, so I apologize for that. But certainly you can see we may get some of the leftover cloudiness from. Let me put my pointer on here. Some of the cloudiness from this little batch of thunderstorms may drift across the western Piedmont, including the Triad region down to Anson County. Whether there'll be any storms, couldn't rule out an isolated thunderstorm, but this has to cross the mountains. And whenever rain and thunderstorm activity crosses the mountains, it goes down the mountain, and that creates a downward sinking action. And that generally tends to thin out thunderstorm activity. It doesn't, not necessarily completely eliminate it, but it tends to thin it out a little bit, so to speak. But the one I'm keeping my eyes on is this complex right here. Gosh, that's a huge thunderstorm complex. But we'll talk about that in a minute and how that's going to be important for us. Let me remove the satellite and put this into kind of a pause. And I want to point out the temperatures. Look at this. We're already, well up into the upper 80s and 90 and exceeding 90 in a few spots across the central North Carolina. And as I zoom out, you see this is a huge, huge area of just a lot of heat. Look at those 80s and 90s covering, much of the central and eastern parts of the country. And it's no coincidence that when I overlay the weather pattern, and let's see here, I'm going to overlay. Bear with me for just a second. Measure overlay, and I'm going to put on here mid-level heights and winds. Bear with me here. You see these lines right here? That's an upper level ridge. That's a big upper level ridge, and anytime you have a large ridge like that in the summertime, that usually means heat and dry weather, and the flow around this is clockwise. So what happens is the flow comes across the mountains, and that helps to contribute some of the heating across the Carolinas, the westerly flow and northwesterly flow. But just the ridge alone creates all this heat, and it locks it into the region. Now, what will happen with this thunderstorm complex up here? This will follow the flow and dip to the south tomorrow. So we are going to be tracking this thunderstorm complex up here in the Midwest, and see if it happens to dip down and affect us here in eastern and parts of central North Carolina late tomorrow. So anyway, we've got two main hazards: the heat from this big ridge and all the heat spilling over the mountains, and then for late tomorrow, this thunderstorm complex, or what's left of it, dipping down across the mid-Atlantic and maybe into eastern North Carolina. So anyway, those are the main players in our weather. So let me go back to the slides here. And of course, let me get to some of the details here first about the dangerously hot weather this week. we're going to see heat index values at or above 105 today across a good portion of central North Carolina. And you can see the area, the map on the left shows where we have heat advisories in effect until 8 p.m. today. 105 is our trigger for heat advisory. So anywhere you see the orange, we expect the heat the heat index to at least reach 105. Okay, if you're not in the orange, that means your heat index is going to stay below 105, but it doesn't mean you're out of the woods in terms of potential impacts. I mean, let's face it, a heat index of 100 isn't that much different than 105. So even though you may not have a heat advisory in effect, say in Randolph, Davidson, Forsyth, Guilford, in the Virginia border counties, Person over to Vance, doesn't mean you may not see heat impacts. It just means you're not going to hit that threshold of 105. Okay, now tomorrow, you're wondering what's the map on the right? Well, that shows where we have an excessive heat watch. Okay, and excessive heat is 100 or higher heat index. And what if this was the day of, we would call that an excessive heat warning. So I want to point out that just about all of central North Carolina is going to have some headline for heat tomorrow, whether it's an excessive heat warning, which is 110 or higher, or excessive or heat advisory, which is 105. You're going to see all of central North, including the Triad and those few Virginia border counties. Just because you're not painted in for tomorrow doesn't mean that you won't see a heat advisory tomorrow. There's a good chance that indeed you will. Okay, so anyway, obviously use caution if you have outdoor plans, stay hydrated, and try to limit exposure to the hottest time of the day. So remind folks, hey, if you have outdoor work, do it either in the morning or in the evening when it's cooler. All right, so then tomorrow's thunderstorm outlook. Remember, I showed you a few moments ago that complex of thunderstorms in the Midwest may be dipping down and catching us here in the Carolinas late in the day. So the Storm Prediction Center shows us in a level 1 and a level 2 risk. A level 2 risk basically from the triangle eastward, and a level 1 risk west of the triangle, mainly because of the tracking of that system. Mainly during the afternoon and evening hours, damaging winds and frequent lightning will be the main hazard. Now, I will point out, I want to mention that there are a few models that show nothing happening. There are a few models that show that thunderstorm complex completely dissipating and nothing remaining from it. So this isn't a guarantee. This isn't a lock, so to speak. So just know that we'll have updates as we run through the next 24 to 36 hours. We'll keep you updated as we see how this evolves as we're tracking it. Okay. The big picture pattern, again, high pressure to our south and east. Aside from a stray shower or thunderstorm today, I think we're mainly dry but hot. That's the pattern for today. Heat advisories in effect for much of central North Carolina. Tomorrow will probably be the hottest day of the week, but also we'll have a risk for that late day thunderstorms too, especially from Raleigh eastward. So, should that happen, obviously those thunderstorms will bring not only a risk for dangerous weather, but will also provide some cooling rain too. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword, so to speak. And then from mid to late week, we'll see a typical mid to late summer pattern with temperatures well up into the 90s and a risk for isolated to scattered afternoon and evening thunderstorms pretty much each day. A cold front will come through late in the week and maybe bring some modest relief for Saturday and Sunday. You see on the upcoming weekend panel, that front to our south. Should that happen, that'll get us highs Saturday and Sunday into the upper 80s, which is probably more seasonable under dry and sunny conditions. So, this weekend isn't looking too bad, actually. All right, so in terms of rainfall, and again, obviously these slides will be emailed, so if you want to see greater detail, you can, examine these maps after you get them in your email. But outside of isolated heavy thunderstorm downpours, generally, most of central North Carolina will see less than an inch of rain this week. Okay, again, if you're under a heavy downpour, yeah, obviously, you're going to see more than an inch of rain if you're under a heavy downpour. But if you're just under an ordinary shower or thunderstorm, if you add up the amount of rain you're going to get the next 5 days, it'll probably be less than an inch. Not a whole lot, in other words. All right, so I'm going to skip past that slide because that slide needs to be fixed. But basically, the bottom line is not really much of a flash flood threat with that. Okay, so let's get back to the severe weather threat. Again, none today. Although interestingly, look at the Monday panel in the upper left. You can see where the slight and even enhanced risk is associated with that thunderstorm complex. And then it just kind of trails off to the southeast and puts eastern North Carolina under the risk from what's left over of it on Tuesday. Again, damaging winds would be the main threat. That would be late in the day. Looks like, we can't rule out an isolated severe cell even on Wednesday. A lot of heat around. So we can't rule that out. And again, typical summer pattern. Okay, so we'll need to be cognizant of that as well. And we'll send you updates as we go through the week. All right, look into the next week. As if this week wasn't hot and if it wasn't already hot enough, looks like that pattern is going to continue into the next week. Lots of heat. And generally on the drier side is that ridge that I pointed out at the beginning of this presentation stays locked into place. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of good news for drought relief, but certainly, there might be a few spots here and there that get some decent downpours, but in the big picture, probably not enough to really knock this down much, if any. All right. So here's the summary. Again, heat will be the main story, main hazard today and tomorrow, with heat advisories in effect. There's maybe some heat warnings tomorrow. But tomorrow we'll have that late day severe thunderstorm risk that I've been talking about. I don't want to be remiss about today. There could be a stray shower or thunderstorm today, particularly across the western portions of central North Carolina. But again, I think those would be very few and far between. All right. And then from mid to late week, it might come down a degree or two, but it's still going to be in the upper 90s, with low 100 heat indexes, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So certainly, this whole week is going to be hot. Let's just put it that way. And then daily chances for afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms, pretty typical summer pattern. And then maybe a little bit of a relief just by a few degrees on Saturday and Sunday. Looking pretty good, actually, weather-wise, dry and hot on Saturday and Sunday, but not like scorching hot like we're going to have tomorrow. Okay, so again, hazards and impacts. Again, this is dangerous heat, folks. Certainly, we definitely need to take precautions and heed those heat advisories and heat warnings that will be in effect. If you have outdoor plans, stay hydrated. Try to limit exposure during the hottest time of the day. That is, do any outdoor activities during the morning or evening. And then again, watch out for an isolated stray damaging thunderstorm wind late tomorrow. Again, there is an off chance that not much, if anything, will happen with tomorrow's storms. But should there be any, they may have some damaging winds with them. All right, so there's that's the weekly briefing for this Monday, the 13th of June.